Fun. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ICC's panel on issues in art, curation, and community care in 2Spirit, Indigenous queer perspectives, and gender minority. Yeah, so I guess I figured I'd start off with introductions. If you'd like to introduce who you are, where you're from, pronouns, whatever you'd like to add, maybe even about your artist practice in general. And so I've kind of like numbered you on my page here, and then we'll just sort of like alternate, so you know that also your question isn't like first always, or that, you know, so that yeah. So yeah, Albert, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'm Albert McLeod. I live in Winnipeg. I'm the president of the Two-Spirited People of Manitoba. I originally come from northern Manitoba, and my ancestry is Scottish immigrant that were involved in the Hudson Bay fur trade, as well as Northern Cree, who were also involved in the fur trade. So my cultural heritage is mixed, European and Indigenous to northern Manitoba and Canada. And I do a lot of work in terms of translation of history, in terms of Indigenous experiences, using different mediums. I do a lot of sort of traditional arts like beadwork and those kind of things, but also verging now into more virtual type of online art. I do memes as well as I do a lot of Zoom events around the idea of being Indigenous as well as Two-Spirit.
Miigwech. Ange, I have you next.
Okay, great. Gwe, hi, my name is Ange Loft. I am from Kahnawake, Kanien'kehá:ka territory, but I've been living in Toronto for about 15 years now by way of Montreal. So I spent some time in Montreal also. So thanks for having me. I work in community art creation essentially, but also in multidisciplinary creation, performance. I tend to work with a lot of people and I tend to work on history projects. And yeah, it's just really good to be here. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Oh, miigwech. Keisha, I have you next.
Okay, I'm gonna turn on the video for this. Damse gidoao kishin sun. Toronto okchi nila maga mistai sagan higunik Norwegian migots. Nuaga maganok mistai sag hinek egwa new sipich egwa amachui swimonich ochiwak. Hi everyone, my name is Keisha. My pronouns are they them. I am from Toronto, but my mom is Jamaican, so identifies part of the African diaspora, and my dad is from Laurent, Saskatchewan. He was born on a reserve in northern Saskatchewan and then placed into foster care. He was part of the 60 Scoop. So a lot of my art focuses around displacement on both sides of my ancestry, as well as like reclamation. I do a lot, I'm trying to do a lot with Cree syllabics because I'm really passionate about like language revitalization. And my main medium is beadwork. I make ribbon skirts with Cree syllabics on them. I'm also getting into digital arts. Yeah, that's about it. Happy to be here.
Oh, miigwech. Logan, you're next.
Kwe Deluisi Logan A Kwelewe Mi'kmaq Amazdagwik Damaguk. Hi, my name is Logan. I'm from Newfoundland, Halapu First Nation. Through my mother's side, I'm mixed ancestry of European, Scottish, Irish, and Mi'kmaq. I am a visual artist, curator. I currently live in, I guess, so-called Kitchener-Waterloo, probably a kilometer away from OCAD University. I think I said that right, which is the land back camp. And my practice is pretty focused on thinking about belonging and membership, and thinking about connecting and community, and I guess sort of situating myself within my practice and in terms of thinking through what all that means. And I'm queer, and as well as disidentified, and I have degenerative hearing loss. That's pretty much the gist of it for me. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be in company and conversation with everyone.
Oh, Miigwech. Raven, you are last.
Hello, everyone. I'm Raven Wings. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here in Toronto, Tkaronto. I was born in Bermuda, and my ancestry is a mixture of African descent by way of Tanzania, and my father being of Mohawk descent, and so there's a big mixture there. I moved to Toronto in 2004, largely to pursue dance, embodied movement practices and healing practices. I've moved more into storytelling by way of theater, singing, vocal, multi things. I'm also an activist on the front line with Black Lives Matter Toronto, co-founded Black Lives Matter Canada. And so that is a nutshell of what I do.
Miigwech. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, Buju, Dipigiki, Siswabagunikwe, Indigenous Mikinakin Dodem, Miiskwaagamiwiziibiing in Dao, Gojiji and Dunjiba. My name is Adrienne Huard. I am a registered member of Couchiching First Nation. Do I have lipstick on my teeth? No, I don't. Okay. Couchiching First Nation, Fort Frances, Ontario. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I am a queer Anishinaabe femme, performer, a PhD student in Native Studies, and an editor at large at Canadian Art Magazine. And yeah, I am really happy to be part of this panel. And so I figured, yeah, let's jump into these questions. So, oh yeah, also, yeah, sorry, pronouns, she, her, they, them. Yeah, that's it. All right, so I was wondering if you folks wanted to talk about your relationship to your queerness, but also your identity in your artist practice, but also your daily lives as well, because we can't separate the two. So how do you negotiate or balance both queerness and indigeneity within your life and within your art as well? So I have Logan. Would you like to answer that one first?
Oh, wow. Okay. And I just wanted to say I'm pronouns he, him, and I'm comfortable with they, them as well. That is a very intense question. I feel as though I have different relationships with both communities and both identities, even though they are one within me. And like, this is such a weird, and I'm sorry for bringing this into the conversation. This is not the tone I want to strike, but I think both of them, for me at least personally, at various stages of my life in terms of connecting to those parts of my identity, I think it has had something to do with overcoming different aspects of shame. I mean, that's my very honest approach to it. I think I'm still probably dealing with a lot of, like, I don't feel ashamed of queerness at all. Like, I'm totally just like, I'm a big capital faggot, you know, and I'm just okay with that. And it doesn't ruffle my feathers when, you know, it sits uncomfortably with other people. I think with my fragmented connection to my Indigenous ancestry and heritage, I have more deep-seated shame in terms of taking up space in areas where just navigate, I guess, knowing my privilege as like a white passing person, it's like with a kind of settler upbringing, I feel as though I often have a lot of shame about that connection, but I also feel as though at times I feel it's something that the queerness has like being queer and having come out of the closet and accepting myself has been a really formative bedrock for allowing me to engage more with community, because I haven't felt like I've had a lot of Indigenous community growing up. It's only been later in life that I've made those connections. And so, yeah, and I mean, that's the honest thing about it. In terms of the way that that impacts my practice, it's very deeply. It's kind of like walking a tightrope, a balancing act. And I feel as though queerness just sort of arrives and I don't really have to percolate it too much. Whereas thinking about how my connections to Indigenous community and how that is a part of me, I feel like it's much more of a focus of my work. But it takes me a longer time to articulate that conversation, and it's way more considered, and I am very like cautious and I want to be accountable to my community and to, so whereas in the queer sense I don't feel like I owe it to be accountable to anyone. In a sense, I think that might be maybe a little bit privileged, or like, I don't know, like kind of an asshole, so excuse my language, but yeah, I just, maybe I'm just a bit more audacious in that world, I don't know, but that's kind of my approach.
Yeah, that's great. And how about you, Raven?
Oh, me. My art largely comes from my navigation of the world. It's my viewpoints. It's how I connect to communities and to other people. I'm a huge introvert. And and because of that, a lot of the way that I participate within all the various communities I'm part of is usually through project-based work, or creating platforms and things of that sort. And for me, growing up, I think there were many things that told me who I wasn't supposed to be. And it really, for a while, framed my sort of misunderstandings about the world. So a lot of my work is decolonizing work. It's trying to get more representation on stages that look like the world we live in. I'm really interested in that. I really want that. I think it's necessary. And so I focused on a lot of LGBTQ plus advocacy in terms of that space. In terms of my Indigenous relationships, it's still very new for me. My father and I were separated for a really long time, and so it's new territory of learning and understanding and listening and reading and all the different things with my grandfather. And so and just honoring that the parts of myself that feel shame for not knowing, but obviously there are full-on reasons why that is. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. There's a beautiful 5-year-old upstairs who's going to be banging around, so just putting that out there. She's lovely.
I have a cat too that likes to make a lot of noise. So yeah, Ange, how about you?
I was funny. I was talking to my wife, and I said, so what about my practice is like uniquely like queer? Could you say like, oh, that's a weird queer, particularly queer thing that you do? And I was like, I don't perceive any of my work to be uniquely queer. And then she's like, come on, you're like, go outside and everyone's gonna go outside and hold up this weird puppet. That's queer. Everyone's gonna have the same weird little matching fabric outfits on. That's queer. Everyone's gonna go and we're all gonna do this dumb dance party at the end of everything. That's queer. It was just funny, all this like, where I was like, yeah, I guess so. Like, I just don't put those things into words very often. Like, I think my relationship with my like, I didn't I'll just, you know, I didn't really even identify as queer until my mid-20s, which is like a thing that a lot of people of color, I guess, go through. I didn't identify as an artist until I was about my late 20s, much well into my late 20s, that I ever identified as an artist in general. Yeah, and it took running away from my community, my home community, essentially, to like be able to figure out what all this is and how to be an artist and how to hold all those different parts of myself, right? So I think yeah, it's really interesting. Like I don't know if I would be an artist or if I would be queer if I decided to stay in my home community. Like I tried. Like I always say to my father, I'm like, I tried to stay in Kahnawake and do it the right way. And you know, I really did. So yeah, but I had to come literally to Toronto to track down other queer mentors and people who I wanted to work with. And then only when I got here, I run into people that are like also on the same sort of path and trajectory as I am, you know, like within Montreal, when I had been there, my community there was not queer necessarily. I like in this weird little funky rock kind of whatever music community, wasn't necessarily queer identified. So for my whole youth, I hadn't really, you know, outwardly expressed these parts of myself, let's say. So I think it's an interesting thing to ask, like, what is its impact on my art? Is like, I think it is this kind of game of subterfuge and this game of like not revealing, and this game of being just uniquely into what I'm into and really going far into those things. I'm really a passionate, like, you know, art and music lover. And now I just so happen to also love my wife, who I've been with for a couple of years now. So, or at least the same long time. Yeah, that's how I identify these days.
Right on. And how about you, Keisha?
Could you repeat the question for me again?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm just curious about like just about the negotiation or balance of queerness and indigeneity within your art, within your life, and yeah, just like how do you balance the two?
Okay. So I really related a lot to what Logan was saying, especially in terms of like in terms of my queerness. I feel like I don't owe anybody like an explanation ever for my queerness. And for me, that is why for the longest time I didn't identify as 2Spirit, because for me, like 2Spirit is an identity that comes with a lot of roles and responsibilities that, you know, I'm just navigating my journey into reclaiming being Cree, you know, reclaiming pride and being Black. And I felt like I couldn't take that on in terms of being 2Spirit as well. So for the longest time, I identified solely as non-binary and as queer. And I never felt like I owed anybody an explanation for that. Or I'd never felt like I had to like be as cautious with that identity as I am with my Blackness, or as I am with my Cree identity. Because if I'm going to represent my Cree identity, it's always gonna, you know, my First Nation has a right to hold me like accountable for things that I'm misrepresenting. But with my queerness and non-binary identity, I feel like that's very like individual to myself. And also I feel like my queerness and my gender identity are, like I say, they're doubly marginalized because they're also marginalized within myself. I don't really talk about being queer and non-binary that often, especially holding like multiple marginalized identities. I find it tough to, you know, hold them all at one time, like being Black, being Cree, and being non-binary at one time. I feel like that's too much for me to carry, especially in terms of like reclaiming those identities. And it definitely changes for me in terms of the location where I am. In Toronto, I was very like open. I was proudly queer. I was proudly non-binary. But like I'm on my journey of like reconnecting with my relatives since my dad was part of the 60 Scoop, I didn't grow up with Nochom with my grandmother. I didn't grow up with Nemoshom. I didn't grow up with my relatives on reserve. So I'm in the process of trying to build those relationships that have been severed. And I don't, I'm not open anymore on the res because I feel like it's not safe. Especially being already an outsider, being Black. Like I don't feel safe in general on my reserve, being the only Black person. So I also don't tell people that I'm non-binary on my reserve. In terms of my art, I don't think there's anything that's actually like super like obviously like queer or non-binary about my artwork. Something I showcased a few years ago was the first ribbon skirt that I ever made. It had West African print on it, as well as my spirit name in Cree Slavics. And a lot of people don't know how long it took me to make my first ribbon skirt, especially negotiating like my own gender identity with myself. For the longest time, I never wanted to enter ceremony. I went to my first ceremony, to my first sweat when I was 20, and that's what I made my first ribbon skirt for. And I thought that, you know, I didn't know how to navigate being non-binary and wanting to enter a space where I present as a female. You know, because I don't identify as a woman. So yeah, I don't know what I'm getting at, but that ribbon skirt for me was a really important part of my journey in terms of like reclaiming roles as a Cree person, and not particularly as a Cree squayo, because I don't know if I identify as a squayo yet, but just as somebody who's, you know, picking up ceremony. Yeah. I don't think I answered anything. I'm sorry.
No, I think that resonates with a lot of us here too, right? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and Albert, would you like me to repeat the question? Just in terms of, yeah, how do you negotiate your queerness and indigeneity within your art, but also within your life as well? Oh, sorry, Albert, that's you. Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh, within, yeah, like queerness and indigeneity in your art, but also just like in your life in general, right?
Yeah, for me, it's you know, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and it was really a time of forced assimilation into Western ways of being and a discarding of traditional knowledge, practice, language in that era. But thankfully for me, I had my grandmother. She was born in 1897, and she died in 1990 at the age of 93. So we were kind of relics of that era, me being gay youth, 15. But, you know, in observing her, I just saw her resilience, and she didn't care, you know, she didn't care about racism, or she didn't speak English. She just had her agenda, and she had her skills, and she was made incredible clothing out of hides and beadwork, and she smoked fish, and she did all of those things that were, you know, passed down to her from her grandmothers and her mother. And I just thought, you know, like, you know, that's someone to follow, right? This person who had lived in a century, you know, before me, into the you know, the 20th century. Now I'm in the 21st century, so it's that honoring that legacy, and this one, it is a woman-centered legacy that I follow as a 2Spirit person. So that's kind of my focus. Is I kind of have 4 areas I address: decolonization, reconciliation, indigenization, and land-based reclamation as part of my process. And, you know, I like to take the ribbon skirt as an example of this resurgence of identity and culture, in that, you know, the ribbon skirt 10 years ago was 2 little ribbons at the bottom. Now it's 10 very thick, vibrant ribbons with all kinds of images on it, you know, appliques that tell a story. So really it is visual art in the sense it's you know, it's a place where women can tell their story, and it's a skirt, so it's utilitarian at the same time. So it really is living in art. It's being art, right? And that's a point of view that every day is art, right? My life is art, and that's something I think colonization tried to erase from our point of view and aesthetic. That life was fascinating and there was representation of art in nature, right? And that's what we mimicked a lot in our daily design of our clothing. Indigenous clothing was semi-tailored. It wasn't bulky, ugly looking uh, items from that era are in museums because they're so valuable in their aesthetic of art, right? And I think we're coming back, we're resurging now with the younger people doing beadwork, making snowshoes now. They're making these ribbon skirts. They're doing powwow regalia. They're making drums. So it's just this whole, and I call it like a tsunami of, you know, post-colonial resurgence that we've been held down so long. Now we're breaking through, and it is language, it is dance, it is theater, you know, it's visual arts, it's videos, all of that. Uh, and so for me, in being gay or queer, realize it is the damage that the churches did to Indigenous people, especially gay people, through the residential and day schools, and as well as the Indian agents in abolishing our ceremonies, which we were involved in. And so it's really shining a light in that era of erasure. And I still experience it today, and just coming out as a gay person and wanting to do Indigenous community development or politics, I still get ghosted by people who are my contemporaries, right? They're highly placed Indigenous activists or, you know, managers, and they pretend I don't exist, right? So there is a need for this visualization that we do exist, and we have a spirit that is not colonial, right? It predates colonization, and we don't only have one, we've got two, we've got a spare just in case. And so to me it is, you know, it's really connecting to that, you know, what our ancestors left us, and I believe they left us a lot despite of the colonization and the forced assimilation.
Oh, miigwech. Amazing. Um, Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I guess we were kind of talking about you know, how we locate ourselves, right? Our ancestors, but also the places that we exist in. Um, and so I guess I'm wondering about your relationships to place and space and how that informs the art that you make. Or yeah, just how does place and space inform your art? Ange, how about you?
Sure. Um, well, I was a young person with a really unique, I guess, upbringing. I got to do musical theater, which is a thing that a lot of brown people don't get to do, and I got to do it with mostly other, you know, like Native people in my community. So I just got like that was like my, I guess, that was my foundational art making time. So everything scrappy, everything reused, everything donations, everything musical, and everything lots and lots and lots of work put into little things that are made only for our community. So this kind of like vibe of working really hard to make something really awesome for only a certain amount of people that will ever see it has always been something that I've always really loved. I have a really hard time, like as I grew up and just became more, I don't know, politically aware, thinking for a while I was going to be like working in policy or working in something, you know, like that felt very like formal and I could do something, make some change. I got really sick of actually working in Western theater for a little while and realizing like, man, I don't know how to make my own work. So the space change of just having to, I said, like pursue the teachings that I needed to really kicked my butt, forcing myself to meet with like writing teachers and people that would like tell me, you know, you can't, you just to do the damn work. You can't just wait for it to come along. So I've kind of taken that into like seriously now. I work with space, thinking about I've had a lot of projects that I want to do outside and a lot of limitations around trying to work outside. Particularly in my hometown, I have like a 5, maybe more than 5 years now. It's been ever since I left, really, from Kahnawake. I've always had the same like dream of creating another outdoor production, gigantic, big old puppet thing with history and information. And it's actually starting to happen this year finally. But yeah, just thinking about like my disconnection from my own home community has actually kind of severely impacted my ability to make things there, because I only visit every so often now, and there's no more theater, so I don't have a home base. Like I don't have a regular place to go to be able to continue that kind of work. I do in Toronto, so I've been working with Jumblees Theatre for this whole time, for like a huge amount of time, working with people that I guess allow me the time and the space I need to give an idea enough research, and to be able to like test things out with different groups of people. And yeah, I really like that. It's not necessarily like a queer way of working, but I get a kick out of like just like forcing the organizations that I work with to work within my time frame, how I like to and how I prefer to revisit things, come back to things, come back to ideas, come back to places, bring all the same people with me everywhere I go. Like that's like a really big part of it, trying to like not build a community, but just build like a trajectory for becoming your own facilitator. So that's it's just like it's been really good for me to always go back and pull some people back into what I'm doing, no matter where I am or what I'm working on. Yeah, so it's space has been trouble for me. I wish there was a space where we could continually meet. You know, just thinking about that thing that's missing is that space to like an ongoing accessible space, even within Toronto or you know, these spots in every city's, at least a spot in every city where we can build and do things and make a mess and live like I did when I was a kid, you know, like to have these kind of open venues where we can make stuff and make things happen as groups. I wish that existed everywhere I lived. So,
Yeah, me too. I absolutely wish. I mean, I feel like it would be so great to just have satellite hub spaces all across Turtle Island and ways that we can connect, because I think about, you know, our riverways and how it was basically like slow dial-up internet connection, you know, but it was how we all connected. And anyway, I just went off on a tangent.
it's
How
weird though.
about
We're missing those places, what they call, you know, like every city had their little council fires, even their places where you could meet and on a regular basis in the summer come together and do something really awesome and then go home and teach more people. So I really feel that lack where I am right now. Yeah.
and especially accessible too, right? Like I feel like some spaces that are particularly more traditional are also you know, not as accepting to two-spirit queer folks, or even folks who don't fit this model of what Indigenous looks like, right? I think about our Black kin or disabled or trans folks. Like there's so many yeah, I think there's just so many limits within like traditional spaces. Anyway, how about you, Raven? How does land and space inform your art practice?
Oh, I will say at this time in my life, completely. You know, I understand my job to be a couple of things. You know, reflecting the world that I see, and projecting like an Afro-Indigenous future, you know, that is abolitionist, that is free living, that is full of care and sustenance and communities. And so you know, I'm here in Tkaronto understanding the commitments of being here and learning to be in better relationship to the people around me, community, land, climate, and really working on how to uproot a lot of the grossness of capitalism and the ways that we as in like people generally can like forget each other or move each other aside for the sake of progress or illusions of progress. And so a lot of my work is reminding people of where they are, centering like our impact on each other. I'm thinking a lot about this time period, as Ange just spoke about, of being in this major pandemic, but a lot of us were already existing in these kinds of isolations and lack, you know? And so it's only more exacerbated in this time period. And hoping people are more aware of that, are wanting to be more focused on helping each other. I understand that, you know, before colonization, no one went hungry. People weren't houseless or homeless, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel in all the ways. Like some things we just need to go back and learn and bring forward, and do away with these systems that only really work off of debt and what we owe. Yeah, and so land is really important to me. And as someone who has grown up in sort of 3 different borders, from the island of Bermuda to Atlanta, Georgia, to now Tkaronto, Canada, you know, experiencing racism and and transphobia and all the things that I experience in vastly different contexts. It sort of shapes the way that I show up in space as well. Yeah, so that's me.
Great. Albert, I know you touched on it briefly, but how does land and space inform your artist practice? You are muted.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too long on mute because you're going to lose a lot of the good stuff. Anyway, living in Winnipeg for 40 years now, I kind of promote this deconstructing of the urban landscape, or even the rural landscape, which is the small town, and just all the sort of asphalt and glass and bricks, and you know, just how the earth is covered over with this sort of Western idea of materialism. And especially for youth, that's a message to this youth, and how you can deconstruct your urban landscape and find those land-based reflections, right? That especially with, like here, there's 2 rivers, right? So those rivers bring in life into the city. And especially at night, that's when the animals will come because it's safe for them to come. So we're never far away from those animals, whether it's eagles or deer, and then, you know, reclaiming the traditional plants, right? Like in our city, we do introduce like sweetgrass and sage and tobacco and cedar, and that's the message for the youth. Maybe you can't go to a northern remote community or on a reserve or a town, but in your city, you need to see it differently, right? You need to see it as beneath the asphalt is the earth, and it's breathing, right? And that's a part of our inheritance. That's, you know, it's our right to, and I say you're in Treaty 1, so live your best life. If you're an Indigenous person, this is it. So live your best life in Treaty 1. And if it means in the urban landscape, deconstruct it and reconstruct it so it has meaning to you. I come from the north, 500 miles north of Winnipeg, and I go home constantly and I'm not invited, right? Those sort of niceties disappeared long ago. And that's part of that ghosting for queer people, right? Where you're invisible, you don't matter. But I invite myself home. And I said, like, fuck you. This is my land. This is my traditional territory. I have every right to be here and enjoy it. And I do. I enjoy it many times more than the people. And that really is, you know, connecting to the water, the plants, the earth, all of that, the sky. And that's what supports my art, right? That energy that our ancestors told us about, you know, to access these power places and receive that energy and apply it. The other thing I'm doing is in digital space. I'm doing an upcoming Zoom session, and it's called 2Spirits Go to Hollywood. And I realized that this generation of youth has not had the opportunity to go to gay bars because most gay bars in North America no longer exist. So in many ways, they don't recognize the old torch singers, you know, for like Judy Garland and all these sort of female personalities that drag queens emulated. So I do this retrospective on old Hollywood movies and who these stars were and why they sort of interested gay people, right? Because they were talking about, you know, erotica, and sexuality and relationships and love. And that there is a narrative that is of indigeneity as well as queer indigeneity that exists in Hollywood today, right? And so it's really, again, showing youth, you know, you just can't take things at face value. You have to dig a little and you'll find it. So.
Wow, wonderful. That's incredible. Miigwech. Keisha, how do you negotiate, or how does land and space impact your artist practice?
I'm gonna keep my video off for this question because I don't know, my data's not really working that well. And I don't want to I don't want to sound redundant, but at the beginning, a lot of my artwork focused around displacement. Like I said, my mom's Jamaican, part of the African diaspora, and taken away, like my ancestors were taken away from, you know, our homeland through the transatlantic slave trade. And then my dad was part of the 60 Scoop. So he was taken away, and my Cree identity was also displaced. But then also my own lived experiences, being born in Ontario, moving to Europe when I was 10, and then to Texas when I was 17. So a lot of my work attempts to find home and belonging. So that the ribbon skirt that I mentioned before, having, you know, that West African print on it was, you know, represented a longing and even perhaps like a romanticization of a homeland that I've never set foot on. And at that time, I also never set foot on my Cree traditional territory, Northern Saskatchewan, Treaty 6 territory. So yeah, so at the beginning of like my journey as an emerging artist, it was around displacement and disconnection. What I also showcased next to that ribbon skirt was 2 medallions that I beaded. One that said Black Lives Matter, and another medallion that said Land Back, Kin Back. So those medallions, those were my two first ever medallions, and they took over 100 hours to bead. So the first one, the BML one, I actually wanted to put instead Black relationship to land matters. However, I decided to put BML. You know, being a descendant of ancestors who were enslaved, there's always this narrative that, you know, we've been severed from our indigeneity. And I don't think it's as simple as that. Even in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights for Indigenous People, how they define, you know, Indigenous peoples as a global term is that there needs to be a continued connection to land. And for people who are descendants of, you know, slavery, you know, it's not that easy, and I think there needs to be some leniency in that. But the Land Back Kin Back medallion was honoring land as kin, and it was also honoring my dad as a 60 scoop survivor. Like, yes, land back, but what about our other kin who've been displaced, who are buried in unmarked graves, across Turtle Island? So disconnection and displacement have played a huge role in the beginning. I recently got into, like I said, one of the mediums I've recently gotten into is digital art and illustration. So what I'm doing now is I'm inserting Black people on my traditional territories in Treaty 6. Because I live here now, I live on my homeland, but the lack of Black presence and history has made me feel like I don't belong on my own homelands. And I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe because of anti-Blackness. I don't feel safe because of homophobia and transphobia on the res. But like Albert said, I have every right to be here. My ancestors' bodies make up, the land that I'm currently on. So I will always call this place home. Yeah.
Awesome. Amazing. And how about you, Logan?
Oh, that's such a tough, amazing. It's hard to follow Keisha after that, because that was just like so powerful, and I relate to a lot of what they had said around kind of trying to figure or trying to negotiate that proximity to homeland when you haven't physically really established yourself there. That's been part of my narrative as well. My parents moved around throughout all my adolescence because of employment throughout Canada, and they resettled back to my mom's home territory of Damaguk when my parents retired. So it's this area that I return to that I call home, but no one really knows who I am there. So it becomes a very complicated, negotiation with community members and yeah. And I had an opportunity to move back and to work there as a professor recently within the last 5 years, and it was very, very exciting and rewarding. It was an amazing experience, but it didn't come without its challenges of being a middle-aged queer, like awkward AF individual in a very small rural environment, and again holding kind of relationship to my nation, Mahalapu Nation, and yeah, it was challenging. It was very, very challenging. And I'm also of that generation. I'm of a generation too, where when they moved, I probably could have went back and made that my home. But as a queer person, I very much I gravitated towards an urban center, like I was just like, get me the F out of here. I want to be around other queerdos and figure out what my other family is going to look like. And that was very important. And it's, been a driving force behind where I find myself in this world. But to, I guess, more speak like about my practice, I think that lived experience definitely has helped inform and shape the decisions that I make. And I do see my work as a way to be critical of space and critical of the ways in which it's exclusionary and the ways in which it doesn't make our identities embraced, and the way that there are barriers. Kind of my knee-jerk reaction to talk about a recent work is I did a public call for the Evergreen Brickworks, and they had a call that was like, we want to address the way that public memorials are being how they don't serve underrepresented people, and so my first instinct was to think about how so many municipal, provincial, national parks are exclusionary spaces and have been. They've been built through the colonial project. They are in the way that they're designed in themselves, they are exclusionary of Indigenous people. They are exclusionary of queer and people with disability. And so I just wanted to do a piece that could be critical of that, but also make space and make and honor those legacies that are left out of those spaces. And so I did a piece called Fruit, quite literally like pulling on queerness, but the work in itself is planting pawpaw trees, which you don't generally see planted in public parks. And that's because I think the narrative is, oh, they're dirty. And I just think that the actual reason is systemic of like the colonial project of being like, we don't want Indigenous people to sustain their lives off the land. We don't want food harvesting. And so it's this piece that like, you know, draws attention to who gets to say when a body is too dirty, too diseased, too queer, too, you know, in the way, like who makes those decisions and why have they been made that way? And let's interrogate that and let's start using these spaces. Like this is land that could be engaged with. It could house people, it could be a resource, it could be a place to harvest. And then they're not, because they're colonial epicenters that are, anyways, I could go on. But the reason that I'm just bringing that up is throughout my practice, I try to be critical and shoulder in ways to bring in queer, Indigenous perspectives. And yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, that really resonates. There's a Hudson's Bay company building that just became vacant in downtown Winnipeg, and there are posters all over it saying, you know, they're, what is it, like people need housing or people deserve housing. And it's, you know, it's just like this vacant space, and 20% of our population here in Winnipeg is Indigenous, and many of us are experiencing homelessness. So, you know, it's ridiculous, this kind of capitalist, individualist mentality that's very Western, right? I've been thinking about representation of Two-Spirit and queer Indigenous people within art, within media. I'm wondering, what are some of the moments that have impacted you most within queer or Two-Spirit art, queer Indigenous Two-Spirit art? Like what are the moments that have really affected you and you felt seen within your own identity? Yeah. How about you, Ange?
Like, so Logan, you're planting pawpaw trees, eh? Because this is like the kind of stuff that I'm actually more identify with. Like, you know, like when I find out that someone's building some kind of weird garden somewhere, or somebody's got a bunch of kids outside learning to do some kind of bizarre weaving practice we don't know, or some sort of, you know, like I'm attracted to people who are like doing the hard work and getting a bunch of people together to do more hard work together. So I think I identify most when I see things that I'm like, aha, I'm not the only one thinking about this, exactly about this, like this damn river. Or like there's other people that I know that also want to work in this space that we never got a chance to go into. And like I'm planting pawpaw, like I want to plant pawpaw trees at my parents' this year. Like I want to go to my father's now and plant trees, and then also like go to the little tiny piece of land that, you know, I'm not allowed to move to because I am married out. You know, I'm not allowed to move back to my community, so I'm actually not allowed to go back. But I do have a tiny little piece of land that I want to put like a whole bunch of like summer crookneck squash in this year. Just go and plant them in the spring and leave them there, and then see what happens when I come back in the fall. So this kind of like weird approach. I don't know who does. I'm like I'm very rarely inspired by other people's work. Like I'm also like, Albert, tell me about your project with the Hollywood Native stuff. That's you know, one of the coolest things I found years ago was like when people make weird archives of their personal experiences, like there was one book I found in a library in Kahnawake at the theater what I was working at, and it had like one person from Kahnawake kind of just, I don't know who it was, and I was just like, this is such a weird queer archive. It has to be like, because it was like cut out pictures of different musical things they went to go see and different bands they loved that traveled between Kahnawake and like went to places, and bands they would see in New York City, and different like shows and premieres of like exciting, yeah, exactly like weird random shows. And it was all just, it had a tape that went with it that had like all of this music, old-timey music that they really loved. And like some of my favorite experiences have not, are queer things that happen with not necessarily queer people. So being raised, helping out, doing, musical cabarets. Like I know every standard in the world, like, and that's such a queer thing. Like I could sing any standard between like the 30s and the 60s, like all the standards, and I think that that's like, that's actually where a lot of my everything comes from, like helping old ladies get into really quick change into, shinier outfits. Like, so it's like, I think the intergenerational thing is the people and the art that's been the most inspiring. Finding Spider Woman theaters work at a age when I was in university, and I was doing like an experimental theater class and was given just this reading, and I was like, who are these women in New York City that are sisters, and one of them's queer and they're wearing like absurd outfits and talking about, violence against Native women and rolling on the ground and screaming and talking about like, so it's like, who are these women? Like, why are these women not in my life? Like, so I found, I had to go find them. So just thinking about like, those are my favorite types of experiences, is actually when you can see the legacy of like what you can see the legacy of people's lived queer experiences, and then you could see that they're like literally cobbling together narratives for themselves. And I don't know who published that book or where I could find it again, but like just this like, old history of someone's personal preferences of music is so great. So no, I don't think of big other, outside art projects. They're all like little small finds that I've found, and people that I'm like, aha, you're doing it just the way I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned the archive, because I know Albert has been working with the University of Manitoba about a 2Spirit archive as well. Yeah, and which I've always wanted to visit. I guess now with COVID, it's been especially difficult. But
it's online.
yeah,
It's
Albert,
University of Winnipeg. It's University of Winnipeg,
now?
and it's online. It's digitized.
Oh no way!
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about it a bit, Albert? And like also, what are your experiences like with representation?
Yeah, I think for myself, Kent Monkman comes to mind as a sort of up and coming artist, and not so much his his early was sort of the erotic of the colonial period, with the fascination of the white man idealized in his art, and so the romance and erotica of that era, and through his female deity, Mischief Eagle Testicle, and her shenanigans. But I think part of that brought up the idea of the trickster, whether it's Nanabuja or Wiisagijack or Coyote or Raven, and how that is a part of Indigenous culture where we have to laugh at ourselves, right? Because we get so caught up in our politics and our power struggles that it becomes totally silly, because we're in here for such a short time. Our lifespan is so short compared to a rock that'll be here for thousands of years, and we won't even be a faint memory, right? And so we need that mirror held up to us to appreciate the important things of life and not get bogged down in things that are not that relevant. So I really saw Kent Monkman's work, and then how it morphed into the residential school era. And what he did was he painted images that we were not allowed to see as Canadians, which was a priest, someone from the school system, and an RCMP on a reserve, taking these children forcefully from their parents. And those are the underpinnings of a genocide, right? And as an artist, he was able to fill in that gap because no photographer would have been allowed to be there to document that for us, right? So there are no photographs of that, right? But if you compare that to the Holocaust, you know, Germany made cameras. All soldiers had cameras. So they documented the violence, the murders, right? The executions. So that's the difference, right? In that during that era, there is documentation, there's visual documentation. For Indigenous people, that was prevented by the state, right? And the church. So we don't have those images. And Ken Monkman, as an artist, a Two-Spirit artist, did that, right? He filled in that gap by portraying the scenes of what happened, right? What could potentially have happened to inform us about this violence, this colonial violence that we're still dealing with today, right? It just doesn't go away in a couple of generations. So I think that is, you know, a contribution of an artist who's done something that other artists might steer away from because it's too controversial, right? So both of that, you know, so Kent would be someone who I sort of, you know, changed my idea of what art could be used for in terms of filling in that historical gap.
Right on. Yeah, amazing. And how about for you, Raven? Yeah, like what are moments for like Two-Spirit or Indigenous queer representation that have impacted you?
It impacted me. You know, it's interesting that there aren't a lot of representations that look like me out there in the world. One person who I can think of was a trans rock and roll soul singer by the name of Jackie Shane, born in the States and then moved here to Canada, and was like one of the first trans people to have a record deal and to be in those particular kinds of circles. And so just a lot of watching how she had to navigate performance because she wasn't allowed to show up as herself. She had to come dressed sort of as a man, so to speak. And so she would sort of change while on stage, you know, and began this sort of gender representation that really sparked so many of us who are here now. And so that's one representation. And then I saw a play called Ogukwe by Wawate Forster, and talking about you know, Two-Spirit responsibilities. There was a coming of age story within that, and it was my first real experience with seeing an Indigenous theater, one in sort of a mainstream space, and I'm sitting with these truths and these stories and these rituals and these you know, responsibilities, and then like sitting with my own family. Sometimes it isn't you know, celebrities and all that. Sometimes it's just the people who are around you that inspire you to sort of grow in different ways. So you know, my grandfather and his barbershop and the kind of conversations that happen in his barbershop, and that's really inspired me. As a trans woman, folks like Angelica Ross inspire me. Non-binary folks like India Moore, who are changing what it means to be India Moore, what it means to be non-binary in like mainstream spaces. It impacts like a lot of the conversations that are able to happen now. Yeah. that's what I would say has really impacted and shifted the way that I see and understand myself. And I'm looking for more of that in those particular ways.
Right on. I wrote a few of them down, actually. I'm really excited to check it out. How about for you, Logan?
I'm going to be a little more, I've been kind of stewing on it, and I wrote a list of names just to be a bit more like, but similar, like oftentimes it's not necessarily even individuals, creators, knowledge keepers who even identify as maybe two-spirit or queer, but I think like Rebecca Belmore for sure has been just one of the major impacts in terms of there's just like, so like the piece, the I'm worth more than $1 million to my people, like I think that was just like, for me, to see such an important artist frame their value in that way, and to step outside of that capitalist you know, institution of the art sector, I think was just like so moving and important. And then also just like like they were one of the, you know, they're such an important national artist, and then they brought work to Newfoundland and even created work that has really engaged with Newfoundland history, Damagug history, and thinking about their piece around Damasduit, which was one of the last Beothuk, and just like, you know, connecting to the geography that I'm from, to see an artist from another, you know, just thinking about the ways in which kinship and solidarity can operate through practice. I really appreciate it. It felt like it actually allowed me to feel less paralyzed about how I connect to other community members and content, because I think that there's so much, for good reason, there's a lot of protocol around what you can and can't do, but I think it can sometimes feel like hard to feel through, and to see Rebecca do it, and I have a lot of appreciation for them as well. Like similar to Albert, like for sure, early Kent Monkman works. I remember seeing those when I was in my mid-20s and being like, oh, and they were like hot, you know. So I was like, cool. I think, you know, also like, I don't know if anyone's seen Deep Inside Clint Starr, which was such an amazing documentary. I thought that was like so phenomenal to see that. It was just like, and then like two like artists from my territory, like just thinking about a younger generation of artists, younger than me. They're not young necessarily, but Jordan Bennett, Megan Mizzou, Emily Critch, and then thinking about a younger generation of like queer, Indigenous, two-spirit artists such as Dana Danger, Jeremy Dutcher, Adrienne. I can't not acknowledge your participation in some of Danger. You're like, hide me. And then, yeah, like even outside, you know, maybe even outside of like an Indigenous context, like Simon Fujiwara was really such an amazing queer artist, in the way that they deal with installation and memory and histories and shared histories. I think offers a lot of value and significance to a kind of collective engagement of the way that we all collaborate with our public understandings. And then I did want to say Raven, I don't know if you've ever seen Wildness by Wu Tang. It's such an amazing documentary. Like, yeah, it's a documentary set around a bar in Los Angeles, and it deals with like gentrification and like a young group of queer radicals sort of taking over like a bar, a Puerto Rican bar to be, anyway, it's great. You should watch it. Yeah, that's it for me.
Great, right on. And lastly, Keisha, how about for you, like just in terms of representation for queer and two-spirit art? Or just whatever's out there, you know, what has made an impact on you?
when I lived in Toronto, I had a few opportunities that really changed, you know, my perspective on art, and even like calling myself an artist. I had the opportunity to be mentored by Thursday Cuthand and Fallon Samard to create a short film for the Toronto Queer Film Festival. And I remember being so scared because I hadn't met them before applying for this mentorship. And I'm like, oh, what if they question my, indigeneity based off how I look? And I remember walking into the space, and what I love about like 2Spirit Indigenous queer people is that most of us are so awkward. So when Logan mentioned that they are awkward AF, I could relate so hard. And I remember meeting Thursday and Fallon, and they're both so awkward. And I felt like instantly like comfortable, because that's the kind of people I like being around. I like being around people who, don't have to pretend to be perfect or be articulate all the time. So yeah, like just in that moment, like I remember that moment, and it was just so funny. I tried my best not to burst out laughing, but yeah, it like I really appreciate them. I appreciate their mentorship. I appreciate what they do and how they made me feel so comfortable in that space, especially like entering that space for the first time.
I love what you say about how folks, don't have to be articulate. People can be messy, and those are the ones that you can also relate to most. And like as queer Indigenous people, like we are definitely awkward, and I don't know. Yeah, I just think about like a lot of the works that have inspired me are like often considered lowbrow performance. So I look at drag, 2Spirit drag and burlesque, and I look at strip and erotic dance, and it's just like there are moments where it's like this, I don't know, it's like it's overexpression, or not even expression, it's just expression, like a buffoonery of sexual clownery. And you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's just like the inherent ability to come back to your body and to love it and to express it in ways that are sexual, but also, a way of expressing your indigeneity, of your gender, of your sexuality, of just all of this. And I think that's so, I don't know, I think that's like so inspiring to me. Like things that are outside of the gallery space have often spoke to me more. But yeah, I love that idea of like us being like awkward and messy. And I okay, I have one more question for you folks. So I know that we're talking about like queerness and indigeneity, and I don't mean to kind of do it in such a binaristic way, because we all have just like so many beautiful layers of our identities. But I was wondering about if your practice has helped you find your identity or become more comfortable or steeped in your identity. Like what are some of the ways that your practice has helped you understand your identity better? So yeah, I guess Raven.
Oh my gosh, fully, I would say. I was a track and field kid when I was younger. My mom took me to New York, and I saw a Broadway play, and that changed my life. In terms of the kind of worlds that you could build on the stage, the kind of like for an hour or so, people walk into a space and they get to be immersed in your mind, in this creative space that you create. And I love the idea of that. I went to school of Toronto Dance Theatre, and it really, sometimes formalized, institutionalized art can squash your not only nuance but your artistic drive. Kind of like what Albert was talking about in terms of like the assimilation into an idea of what dancers are supposed to look like or talk about on stage. And I find myself needing like an avenue to explore that. And I saw a drag queen by the name of Stephanda Cox here in Toronto. And it changed my life because it was so exciting. It was so fun. She was incredible. The room was so alive when she came on stage. She was doing a Janet number, and Janet is my queen. She's so much to me. But you know, what struck me was I was looking around the room, and it felt like everyone was having this similar, like, we're supposed to be here in this moment. Even the young queer kids were like, oh yay, we got to see this fabulous drag queen and we're living our lives and la la la. And I didn't have that at school. And so I took it to school. I took it to Toronto Dance Theater, and I was like, we're gonna do drag. And I got my partner and my best friend, and we did drag every time that we could. And it started off as for fun, like an outlet, a way for us to sort of explore all the things from me that I was told that I wasn't allowed to do and or be. And I thought I was putting on a character. I created this like super queero person identity. And when I saw a videotape of myself, I was like, wait, that's actually how I feel on the inside. I look like how I feel on the inside, which terrified me and excited me at the same time. And it was actually a conversation that Laverne Cox was having at Mohawk College that really sort of lit this fire in me, because she was just talking about her life, her experiences, Anti-Woman Tour, and there were 400 people stacked in the room just to listen to this Black woman's story. She came on stage and she was like, hello everyone, I'm Laverne Cox and I'm a African-American trans woman. And I was like, like it just, and for years I was tussling, am I non-binary? Am I allowed to be trans if I don't have like a destination gender? Like all this stuff was happening for me. And here was this person kind of showing me from Alabama, you know, Mobile, Alabama, that was possible, you know, kind of like this possibility model. And so then I just soaked myself in and started showing up as myself in all spaces. And it really started to shift everything about my life to the place I find myself now, where there's this mixture of art and activism and abolition, and it's all sort of swirling into one, like one of my other heroes, Nina Simone. And so there's like, yeah, my art has totally allowed me to exist and find myself and find peace in all the intersections that I am. It's like the one time that I can, I don't have to be anything, I just am. You know, when you have those moments where you're just like, this is it. I'm not trying to do anything, I'm in the moment. And that's why I love dance so much. Because I don't have to think about it. I just get to like sit in the emotion or the fantasy that I'm creating. And then getting to sort of live that out. Yeah. So that's my experience.
Awesome. How about for you, Ange? Has your practice helped you understand your identity?
I'm actually like, other people can go first. That's a long one. That's a hard one. I don't know. I think that the stuff that I've had to deal with, coming into as I get older now, and as like, not necessarily as a grown artist, but as just like I love extreme sensations. I love loud noises and bright lights and like pump. Like, I've always been attracted to like the most I don't know, just like the most extreme of sounds and the most extreme of like experimenting and feeling like, you know, I've never been a speaker hugger, but like I get it, you know, like I've been raised in places where the like in just like I grew up growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s in Montreal with all this access to like really loud and wild and heavy and complicated stuff. Like it that's the tone that I want to live in. And like I don't want to be ruckus and hurt myself anymore, but I want to be able to know that I need, you know, I need that in my life. I want, and that's like the, you know, I want the most extreme experiences. I want to see too much and experience too much at the same time, because it's been one of my, it's just sensory desires for my whole life. How do I just have more of like all these things? So coming into that and kind of being like, oh, I'm just like a maximalist creator. Okay, so that's what it is. I want to see things big and I want to experience things that are humongous. Just like, I think that like owning now, like there's a lot of tendency, I think, to I don't know, I make a lot of like, sometimes I don't want my work to be sincere. I want it to be snotty and stupid and crass and annoying and messy. And I don't want, like, sometimes I still feel myself struggling between this weird, how do I make things that are perceived as sincere when I don't want to be that kind of artist? And I am doing this still. So it's trying to come into my own with that. I think that comes around to like just being open to, I'm not done growing as a queer person. I have like, many, many years left to do figure out what I really want to see in the world. But like, just to be able to, like honor that I am full of anger. I am full of like tons of distaste for things that I think are dumb. I like, and kind of owning some of those realities now and just being like, I don't need to support all Native artists. I don't need to support all queer artists. There's very few of them that are inspiring to me in a certain way because I want to go to a different place. And so just trying to like own all of these realities for myself is something that like, I just want to not have to speak English anymore. And I want to be able to, play with objects and do object manipulation theater again and go back to like these kind of other things that for a long time I put aside, the same way that I put aside dealing with actual like indigenous, or like I do all this talking treaties work right now, and it's like for years I didn't touch Native content. And so yeah, just this kind of like trying to navigate for myself where the next part of my work goes and still allow myself to be like into only like ugly and funky and loud things. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's all over the place. So trying to figure out how to harness the dark side. I don't know, and still have fun and make fun of things. Yeah, it's been something I'm trying to deal with now. Yeah.
I love it. Don't hold back, Ange. Just let it go. How about for you, Keisha? Are there has your artistic practice helped you understand your identity better?
For me, yeah, it definitely has. Art has allowed me to, explore parts of myself that I've never felt comfortable exploring, like directly. Art has also been, healing. It's helped me, process trauma. And it's also helped me, like what Raven said, like create worlds and, imagine, futurities of, a world outside of, like trauma that we see so much in our communities now. But yeah, for me, like art has mainly been healing. But yeah, it's also helped me explore like the intersections of my identities as well. But yeah, I just hope that more like Indigenous folks and, Indigenous youth are able to access, opportunities and, resources to create art and, explore, their artistic side, like in the future and like now, because I feel like it's so necessary, especially, like on reserve Indigenous youth who haven't had the same opportunities that I've had to, be part of artist residencies and, be mentored by Thursday and Fallon. Like it's definitely something that I'm really passionate about today, like creating opportunities for, my relatives that are still on reserve and folks who don't have, those opportunities.
Awesome. And you, Logan?
I totally relate to what Keisha is saying. Just, yeah, like it's my practice has been, for sure, my identity has, I don't know, I've come to better understand who I am because of the work that I'm doing. I very much understand my practice as a kind of, extension, like a language on its own. And it's a language that I don't ever speak verbally. It's more like an emotional language, and then it finds its way into being tactile through that art practice. And I think for the longest time, it's been very much centered on who am I, where do I belong, where do I fit, who do I connect with, am I allowed to connect, and like sort of asking a lot of really hard questions. And I think as I'm getting older, maybe those questions are feeling more resolved. And so now I think my art practice has sort of shifted to become, well, what else can I do to, be, to like support my community, to support others, to create new pathways that have been, barriers for other people, other community members, and not like, I don't know, like within the limits of like my scope of influence, of course, like I'm not, but I think absolutely, I've come to better understand who I am, and my limitations, but also the things that, I don't know, that I can do, and why I'm important and why I'm valuable. And for sure, like back to, not to be like so cyclical, but like back to that the first question around shame. Like I think my practice is the thing that helps me like dismantle shame and move past that and accept who I am and accept what I have to offer and my value. So yeah.
Right on. And how about you, Albert? Has your art practice helped you understand your identity better?
Yeah, it's been a long process, a long trajectory, and I'm 65 now. And I was at the gathering in 1990 when the name 2Spirit was introduced. And there was about 80 2Spirit people there from across North America. Many of them were artists. So it was this sort of constellation of thinkers and visionaries and spiritualists and medicine people and knowledge keepers, and it created quite a dynamic. And I think that's why that name arrived at that time, because it taught us about the power of spirituality. That again, as I mentioned earlier, is part of our inheritance from our ancestors, and the world we live in. And, for myself, learning the confidence of applying my point of view, my aesthetic, my view of life and rights, human rights, particularly with Indigenous experiences. And we're invited to different tables. And, I've been invited to political tables around the inquiry, Murdered and Missing. And one, perspective I put forward is that, in the end, what Canada should understand is that Indigenous women and 2Spirit people are indispensable to the future of Canada. That's what people need to understand. Because we were here when the settlers arrived. And, to end the violence, that understanding needs to be there, that we are indispensable mentally, emotionally, psychologically, politically to the future of this nation if it wants to be considered a democratic civil society. And that's when the violence stops. And so artists have that ability and confidence to imagine these things, to conceive these things, then to share this with the powers that be, right? And in many ways, it is our responsibility at this time. So to me, it is, much more confident through you know, experiencing life in Canada, but also being guided by the visionaries and the artists who don't believe the bullshit, right? Who break through the bullshit, you know, expose the bullshit and the lies and the phoniness, and they use their art as the tool to do that, right? And so yeah, that for me. It is, you know, it's been a long journey, but you know, so much more now, richer and full of that sense of spiritual power.
I'm not gonna cry on camera. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I think about that so much, you know. There's kind of a back and forth like conversation about, you know, representation in terms of like imagining us in a future versus, you know, people feeling conflicted about being in like the kind of major public eye or like mass media. Is like, what do we hold dear, or how do we not replicate like capitalist models, but at the same time, like, who doesn't want to be seen as well? Because I feel like I definitely didn't have that growing up as well. So I don't know, it's just a balance. But I loved what you said about us being indispensable. Yeah, that's whew, beautiful. I guess we have time for one last question, a quick question. So I'm just thinking about like the spaces that we enter, like within the art world or even institutions or whichever. What are some of the ways that we can make them more inclusive and accessible, and not even to Two-Spirit communities, but I just mean as a whole, because I mean, I don't know about you folks, but like community is always central to my ways of thinking. And so, yeah, what are some of the ways we can think about accessibility? Yeah. How about you, Logan?
You know, that's such a, I almost want to say there's not, you know, like they just are the way they are, and we have to think about new models. And I think those new models are arising. And I think, I don't want to say like that those spaces shouldn't exist, but I just think that they're, yeah. I mean, I think for the last decade, 2 decades, we've been seeing artistic practices move outside of those traditional institutions. Traditional, and by traditional, I do mean like those that Western model of like galleries, theaters, museums, you know, collecting institutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but yeah, I think we're seeing grassroots efforts to support practices and allow creation to happen outside of these spaces that are valued equally, if not more, than the ones that are placed in those institutions. The way that they could maybe be more inclusive is to give us much more funding to make sure that that happens, and in ways that are equitable. The end. Yeah.
Oh, Keisha's data is acting up. Okay, I won't pick you next then. How about you, Raven? What are some of the ways you can think about inclusivity within these spaces?
Yeah, I think it can't be a theoretical model anymore. I mean, so many people have written books about it and theories and la, but it has to be an embodied practice, you know, in terms of how we relate to ourselves and each other. And what I mean by that is, like, when I'm thinking of creating a space, I am creating a space where I expect people to show up. And so it's going to be a space that's not waiting for Indigenous people to show up to have a decolonial ethic, or not going to wait for Black people to be assaulted in the street by police officers in order to care, or, you know, that I think like a major radical shift on how we relate ourselves to mental health. and this sort of delineation that we made between mental health and mental illness, as opposed to focusing on mental wellness, and what if mad states were desirable states, you know, then I think we'd be in a really different place with how we treat each other, in our sort of access or quest to power. And so I think it has to be uprooted in our relationships, and then we can actually be a society that has these systems of care, these actual relationships that, like I said, they've already existed. You know, we don't always have to reinvent the wheel, but I think that we've focused on maybe the wrong things. You know, in terms of capitalism, in terms of climbing this ladder, this sort of social capital, whatever. Because the way that it works is how, as long as capitalism exists, there are people who are super rich and people who have nothing. And so when we reimagine a new way of being in relationship to each other, where like we as people are each other's economy, like we are each other's currency, as opposed to money and things like that, I think it will shift a lot of the ways that we care for each other.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And how about you, Ange?
I'm thinking about more like what would have helped me, what still would help me, I guess, right now. That humility thing is a really big issue, I think, with a lot of Native queer artists or Native artists in general, but mostly I just thought like this kind of question about, like, a lot of us didn't write about ourselves growing up. Like, and I think a lot of people did have that experience of being actually asked to write about themselves and to like practice representing themselves in a certain way. Like, it might have just been because I skipped art school, you know, and I also skipped doing an MFA. And, you know, these kind of questions around like discomfort with the ability to write about myself and about my work, that kind of stuff, like I still need that kind of help. And I wish that, like, you know, like meeting with a group of people like this, you know, like it would be so useful if this kind of thing existed where what we did was write about each other and write about our, you know, how do we actually articulate what's so special about what we do in the context of our own community. So not outward facing, you know, like how do we write about ourselves and what we want and how we want to see the world from a way that we're writing to each other, where we're not writing to, you know, to prop ourselves up individually. We're writing to find the uniqueness and the specificity amongst our practices. Like, so I'm just seeing like a big, I would love for that. I would love for that kind of work to keep happening so that younger people don't have to feel like they have to make themselves of words and that they have a lot of practice in doing that for themselves. Like that's what held me back for so long, was not having, I guess, being raised to be like absurdly humble and not talk about myself, because then I was bragging. So like I still don't talk in my community about what I do, because, you know, so how do I write for my own community what I'm up to, and how do I write for other people to tell them what I'm up to, like, has always been a problem. Like, and I don't think it's a uniquely Two-Spirit queer issue, but it's connected to shame, and it's connected to all of those reasons why we don't want to say we're better than others. How that's connect, you know, that capitalist structure of having to prove that you are you are the unique one with this unique perspective. I think that's what's been holding me back, but also holding back like a lot of people, is like, you don't want to present yourself as being anything special or unique. Almost there's something just really interesting about how I just want to know, the secret of how artists have been doing this their whole lives and continually putting themselves back on these little platforms constantly. Like, it's just something that I don't know how to do and I'm not comfortable with, and I would love it if I had that experience as a young person, because then I, you know, I've done so many things in my life now, you know, and I still have such a hard time putting that into a bio or putting that into a, you know, it's still bad. It's still hard. And I've been around the world. I've traveled with all kinds of places and, you know, done a bunch of stuff, and I still can't it still feels bad to talk about it. Which is a really weird experience as an adult now. Yeah, so it's a weird question. Yeah, but that's the help that I imagine lots of people need, so that we don't have to talk about ourselves. Someone else can just say it for us. Then you can write down what they said. Yeah.
I love that idea though of even like workshopping that, but also within that building up the kind of support, or how do I say this, like empowerment in order to speak truthfully and honestly about your accomplishments as well, because you know I feel like so often we're told not to, but you know we've all done incredible things, and I think that we also deserve to take up that space as well. So
and what kind of elder or senior artists who've been doing this for a long time, like let's just pull them back in to help us do this, because they used the right words before, so how do we just bank on not having to say the same thing over and over about ourselves? Yeah.
That's a very good point. How about you, Albert? What would you like to see that are more inclusive in different spaces?
Yeah, I think, we need to challenge existing systems and access those resources that we need for, the coming generations who are artists, who have the right to express themselves, whether it's their being 2Spirit or the indigeneity. And right now there aren't those spaces in Canada for these youth. And there needs to be a part of, this reconciliation idea, but also of healing. And that, the creative spirit is in these youth, it's in their DNA. There's goldsmiths, there's dancers, there's playwrights, there's, visual artists, there's, poets. And we need to make a space where they can express themselves, where they can learn, where they can grow. So really it is now we're at a point, I said, there's a tsunami of culture coming. And that's based on the last 20,000 years that's been held back and repressed. And it's going to break through. And these youth will need those spaces to learn their art, their craft, and excel and grow. And so I think it behooves us, in this generation to ensure, we challenge the powers that be and say, this is equity, this is our right to do this. And this is, many of our youth are suffering. And we know that art is such a healing process that, we need to champion these right now.
That's so true. I'm just writing this all down. It's, yeah, I think about how much information that we've lost because there is that mentality to like produce and to, to fulfill this model of just like industrial production, right? But I feel like within that we've lost that creative. Shouldn't say we've lost. I feel like that creative spirit has been sleeping for a while now, and it's time to, really nourish it. I just yeah, I don't know about you folks, but I feel like meeting with other indigiqueer folks is, yeah, it's just this has just been so wonderful. Keisha, are you around? How's your data?
I had to go outside. It's better now. I'm just cold. Yeah,
Saskatchewan. Yeah, so yeah, what are some of the ways that you'd like to see like accessibility or inclusion within like organizations or yeah, institutions?
So I'm gonna answer it like how Angie answered it. Thinking about like what has held me back in my own practice and like nourishing my creative spirit. Like trying to enforce like Western and colonial notions of art on youth are those who are who are picking up art for the first time, I think held me back for a very long time. I thought I wasn't qualified to do art or call myself, identify as an artist because, you know, I don't have qualifications. I don't have, you know, a degree in art. University itself is not accessible. So, you know, that makes it like really inaccessible for community folks who want to pick up art, who want to call themselves artists, to, you know, get into that, to get into the art scene if they don't have those, you know, qualifications. So yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it. Like, everybody has a right to do art, to nourish their creative spirit, and to call themselves artists. And I feel like, you know, I don't know, that's what we should be like nourishing in, you know, Indigenous folks, and especially younger Indigenous folks who are gonna grow up in the future. And then also not to enforce like certain mediums on Indigenous folks. Like, yes, I do beadwork, yes, I make ribbon skirts, but, you know, I should be allowed to paint, and that's still gonna be Indigenous art because I'm Indigenous. That's still gonna be queer art, even though I'm not like, you know, even though like the painting might not itself like be, you know, like represent queer folks or like be obviously queer, like it's still gonna be queer, it's still gonna be Black, because, you know, those are my identities and those are the identities I carry. So also like that is like something I've been thinking about recently too. Like, my dad was also talking about the art he does. He does a lot of sculpture, and when he was a teen, his adopted mom wanted to put him into a competition, like an artist competition, and it was only for like native art, and he started questioning himself at that age, if doing sculptures, you know, is native arts. And he also came to that conclusion that, you know, no matter what he does, no matter what medium he uses, it is Indigenous art because he's Indigenous. Yeah. I think that's it. Sorry, I forgot the question.
No, but I think that's so important. We also, I think there are inherent limits in how we feel like we can represent ourselves, and whether that's internalized or mostly imposed on us, like it's there, right? So yeah, I cannot thank you all enough for coming to this conversation and contributing so much. Like, I don't know, I just feel like every time I'm in like queer Indigenous spaces or Two-Spirit spaces, I just feel like re-energized, or that, you know, my spirit has been fed in some ways. So yeah, aho miigwech. Thank you, everyone.